The movie begins with a man named David Wozniak going to his family's butcher shop. David meets his brother there and asks for his help with his wheat growing plan. His brother just receives a phone call revealing that he is expecting a baby, but he doesn't seem happy about it. He refuses to participate in David's plan. David reveals that he owes $80,000 to some people and wants to grow marijuana to sell and repay the debt. This shocks his brother, who asks how he ended up owing that much money. David explains that he invests it in a technology project, and his brother harshly tells him it's a pyramid scheme. Their father talked to him about getting the jerseys for the family. In desperation, David applies for a loan, but all his applications get rejected. Then, he goes to a sports jersey store. The store owner is about to close, but David convinces him to sell him a jersey. However, he gets a parking ticket afterward. When he returns home, David takes care of his plants and talks to his brother on the phone when his delivery van gets towed, along with all the jerseys inside. In the end, only David is left wearing a basketball jersey to take a photo. Then, David goes to meet his girlfriend, Emma. Before entering the house, he picks a few daisies outside to give to her. Such a good guy, but she sees through it. Emma reproaches him for not being able to contact him for several days, and David stumbles over his words. Emma reveals that she is pregnant, and David just nods without saying anything, which disappoints her. She then tells David that she wants to have the baby on her own because she can't rely on him and advises him to find his own life. Then David goes to meet his friend, Brett, a lawyer, and tells him about what just happened. He also admits that initially, and didn't say anything, but then he realizes that it is the best thing that ever happened to him. Brett has 4 kids and is struggling to take care of them while talking to David. He tells David that having children is a huge responsibility, and David doesn't have what it takes to be a father. Afterward, David returns home and realizes that someone in his apartment, so he picks up a baseball bat near the door. He cautiously walks in and finds a man introducing himself as Mark Williams, a lawyer from a sperm bank. David tries to deny being David by speaking in Spanish, but the lawyer doesn't believe it. The lawyer continues to explain that David, under the alias Starbuck, has donated sperm 693 times in the span of 33 months and received a total of $24,255. The clinic then gave all his sperm to all the female clients, resulting in David having 533 biological children, out of which 142 children want to know his identity. Although he signs a contract with the clinic to protect his identity, the lawsuit from the 142 children challenges the legality of the documents he signed. David still tries to speak Spanish, but clearly that it's useless. The next day, David met Brett and discussed the lawsuit. Brett briefly asks about David's confidentiality agreement and seemed disappointed that David had never told him about it. Brett told David that it would be a complicated case, but he would handle it. He then hands David an envelope containing the profiles of 142 children. However, Brett advises him not to open it. But as soon as he got home, David opens the envelope and look at one of the profiles. The next day, he met Brett and asked him to accompany him to watch a game of one of his children, who turned out to be an NBA player. Andrew scored and win for his team. After the game, David showed Brett that he is proud of one of his children, saying that Andrew had his scoring genes. Brett advised him to demonstrate in court that he had a mental health issue, which would absolve him of responsibility. David angrily refuses and Brett tell him shout exactly that way at the course so it can prove his point.
Say it exactly that way.
David became very confident after Andrew's victory, so he show off at the family basketball game. David went to meet Emma at the police station where she worked. He told her that he would do everything to convince her that he is a proper father for their child. However, he still behaved like a fool there. While working at the family meat shop, David mentioned that his girlfriend is pregnant, and they were happy for him. That evening, he opened another file in the envelope to look at. The next day, he went to a coffee shop where his other son, Josh, worked as a barista. He ordered a cup of coffee and realized that Josh is in a bad mood. David advised Josh to be more polite with customers, which made Josh angry. Josh said he didn't want to be a server, he is an actor and miss an audition because he is busy working at the coffee shop and couldn't smile. David had to leave. While in the van, David thought about what had just happened and went back to tell Josh to go for the audition while he manages the coffee shop. Although hesitant at first, Josh agrees when David let him borrow the van. Later, David found himself in trouble as a long line of people at the coffee shop wait for their drinks, and the place is a mess. David even messes up orders for customers. At the same time, David's brother calls to criticize him for leaving the family shop. Just then, the coffee shop owner appears and threatened to call the police, insulting David's son Josh as a terrible actor and firing him. Josh came back and told David that he got a role, which made David happy. That night, he opens another file in the envelope. David lurks under a girl's house, pretending to be the pizza delivery person, and went to her apartment. There, by overhearing her phone conversation, he found out that his daughter Kristen had financial problems. Kristen ordered him to leave the pizza on the table and go, but he lies that according to company regulation, he couldn't leave customers like that. Not getting a response, David checked Kristen's room and found her overdosed on drugs. David quickly took Kristen to the hospital. As soon as she woke up, Kristen ran towards him, trying to escape. Luckily, the nurses caught her in time. David calls her out, and the doctor asks him who he is. Kristen then asks if he is ashamed to call her his daughter. The doctor then told David that they had a recovery program, but Kristen didn't want to participate. However, since she is still a minor, David has the authority to make decisions on her behalf. When David is about to talk to Kristen, she persuaded him to sign a release form instead of participating in the recovery program, promising that she would stop using drugs on her own. She also told David that she had a job, and if she participates in treatment, she will lose that job. After being persuaded, David went to talk to the doctor and request to sign the release form. David asks Kristen about her workplace and hug her. The next day, David waits outside the building where Kristen claimed to work, and he is thrilled to see her arrive, realizing that she is telling the truth. Afterward, David threw away all the marijuana, and a trash collector happily picked it up. He pins all the files of his children on the wall, then began finding ways to meet them. David follows one of his children who is singing on the streets and contributes money to him, as well as approach passers-by to donate to him. He accompanies one of his children to their workplace and talked to him, then gave him money. He frequently visits a park where one of his children work as a tour guide. David also went to a public pool where one of his children work as a lifeguard, and then to a bar where he helps his intoxicated son get home. We see him going to a nail salon and pretending to be a customer of his daughter. He then follow one of his daughter and stop men from catcalling her, David telling Brett how happy he is being with his children, not as a father but as a guardian angel. Then, he went with Emma to her first ultrasound as a friend. David becomes extremely excited when he sees his son. Afterwards, they went to a park where they observed children playing. Emma expresses her fear of parenting, but David assures her that she would be a good mother. Emma said that she would allow David to be a father, but a father on probation. At home, he picked a file and had a special reaction when he saw it. He go to the center for people with special need, visiting his son named Ryan. He hesitates to approach him, but the caregiver convinced him to say whatever he want. David spent time with Ryan without saying anything. The caregiver said that the visit is enough. Then, David followed one of his sons on a bus, got off and saw him kissing various men. Finally, David followed him to a hotel attending a conference. Upon hearing the speaker, he realized that it is a gathering of all 142 of his children, who had filed a lawsuit to know his identity. David stood up and looked around. Everyone thought he wanted to say something, so they handed him the microphone. David told everyone that no matter what happened with the search for Starbuck, they should be happy for finding their siblings. After the meeting, Kristen recognized him and called him. David lies that he's Ryan's foster father, which is the reason he attended the gathering. Josh, the lifeguard and tour guide, also recognize him. He introduced everyone, then quickly made an excuse to leave. Outside, he's surprised to see Brett suddenly appears. He then told David that he had to stop meeting his children, claiming that David always made wrong decisions. But David insists that it is the only thing he had done right in his life. The two didn't realize that one of David's children had overheard their conversation. At home, David is attacked by the people he owes money to and he promised to pay them back. Then, he tried to call friends to borrow money when he heard someone enter the house. David is surprised to see one of his children, who, introduced himself as Vigo, had overheard his conversation with Brett earlier. David again pretends to speak in Spanish, but Vigo isn't fooled because he saw a bill with David's name outside and the wall cover in his children's files. David feared that Vigo would expose him. Ironically, David worked at a butcher shop while Vigo is a vegetarian. Vigo wants to stay at David's house to learn more about him. After 2 weeks, David is terrified of living with Vigo and complained to Brett that Vigo is annoying, always want long conversations, but Brett advised him to endure it if he doesn't want to be exposed. David visits Emma, brought her food, and paint her walls. That night, seeing that Vigo isn't happy, David invites Vigo to play basketball with him, but it is evident that he isn't good at it. Vigo is very happy and suggests that David join the camping trip with the group of 142 children, but David said he couldn't because he is busy spending time with his real family, Emma. This upset Vigo. Feeling guilty, David went with Vigo to the camping trip, where David spends time with them. David even brings meat and sausages for a barbecue session, and they all have a great time together. The next morning, he brings Ryan along, and they watched the sunrise with the other siblings. Later, at the center, David confesses to Ryan that he is his father, and they will meet more often. David introducing Emma to his family. Despite David's shameful past, his family tells Emma that he is a good person. David's father mentions that he is very affectionate and considerate, recalling how David organized a dream trip for their parents to Venice and paid for the whole trip when he was only 20 years old. Emma really likes David's family but asks him how he managed to earn enough money to take the family to Venice. David simply says it was manual labor. Afterward, David meets Brett, who seems very angry. He shows David a newspaper with pictures of their children taken during the trip to the lake. Brett tells him that it has also caught the attention of CNN, Fox, and BBC, and it is a good thing because now they can countersue the clinic for using too much of David's sperm, resulting in the birth of 533 children and causing extensive media coverage that has affected David's reputation. If they win the lawsuit, David will receive a substantial amount of money to settle all his debts. Brett also implies that public opinion is turning against Starbuck, and the things they are saying about David are not pleasant. He asks Emma what she thinks about the Starbuck situation, and she admits that she finds it horrifying. When David arrives at the butcher shop, he discovers that his dad got threatened by his loan shark. David visits his father, who asks him to leave. With no other option, David goes to meet Brett and agrees to countersue. After several days of trial, the court supports David's countersuit, although Brett was not very confident in his performance. They win the lawsuit, and David's identity is kept secret, along with receiving an additional $200,000 as compensation. During a post-trial interview, Brett almost mentions David, but he quickly says it was his lover. When interviewed, one of David's children expresses gratitude because, despite losing the case, they are thankful to him for bringing them together. David meets Brett after being publicly announced as his lover on national television. He asks Brett if he reveals his identity, whether he will lose the compensation money, and Brett confirms it. David meets his father, tells him the truth, and asks him for guidance on how to resolve the situation. His father shares his own story and says that seeing his children is his happiness. He then gives David his inherited money from the butcher shop. Finally, David posts on Facebook that he is Starbuck. Then, David goes to the hospital where Emma is giving birth. The next morning, a nurse informs David that his family is waiting outside, and when he goes out, he sees his father, siblings, and all the children waiting in the hallway. They all congratulate and hug David. Right after that, he confesses to Emma that he is Starbuck. Emma gets angry with David, but he explains that he wants to do the right thing for their son and his other 533 children. He also tells her that he loves her deeply and genuinely wants to marry her. Finally, Emma accepts the truth, and lets David's children see the babies. The movie ends with David spending time with his children and gathering outside in the park to listen to their brother sing. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more videos like this.